Okay. Hi, Jesse. This is Morgan here.
Hey, Morgan.
I'm good. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. I know you're a busy man and you've no obligation to us. So, my sincere thanks for agreeing to give us the time to do this
Yeah,
interview.
thank you. I appreciate being on. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm here with Howard. Howard's my co-host.
Pleasure to meet you.
You too, buddy. Thank you.
Okay, so it was my doing. I'm the one who wanted the opportunity to talk to you. So I became aware of you probably a year and a half ago, just through a YouTube feed, and I saw you as this kind of enigma. You kind of captured my attention immediately because it wasn't what I've come to expect from a black guy from the States. Up until that moment, everything I'd seen on the news, television, or radio, movies was I had this impression that most black guys in the States were Democrats. I hadn't ever seen a kind of conservative black guy. And then so I started to listen to a couple of your shows, and I've maybe listened to kind of 10 hours in total. And then when I discovered that you grew up on a plantation, I was kind of shocked because I didn't think, one, that plantations still existed in that particular time period. And then to hear you talk about them in kind of a positive light kind of took me aback as well. And my initial reaction was to say, well, hang on, there's something wrong here. This doesn't sound right at all. Everything I've been taught about plantations was essentially the same narrative as slavery. And so
Yeah.
I found that really, really interesting. And it's not something we hear in this part of the world. The narrative we hear is that everything around plantations and the South was awful. And then what kind of captivated my attention beyond that was to see how much of a success you were coming from that background. And so that really made me want to reach out and have a talk with you. So I was hoping you could kind of fill in a little bit more information about what it was like to grow up on that plantation and what it actually looks like on a actual day-to-day level of that type of existence.
Okay. Amazing. Absolutely.
That's it.
Oh, are we rolling already?
Oh yeah, we're straight
Oh,
in.
Sorry.
Enough.
Okay.
Crossed wires, as they say.
Well, thanks again for having me on. And yes, I grew up on a plantation down in Alabama. My parents worked the plantation, their parents and their parents and their parents. And it was amazing. I had an amazing time growing up. I went to school. There were times when I was taken out of school to plant the crops, and another time to harvest to bring it in. I do remember for colors only signs, and I went to an all black school. But because my parents and grandparents and their parents didn't hate anyone, they treated all people the way that they would like to be treated. We were taught to be the same way. And so I did not grow up hating white people. And there were white people who we got along with very well. I remember the Jim Crow laws, but it was told to us that that was the Democratic Party trying to keep the blacks out of the Democratic Party because the Democrats did not want blacks to be a part of it. And so most black people in those days were Republicans. As a matter of fact, it was blacks and whites who started the Republican Party because the Democrat did not want blacks as a part of it. We were taught that the battle was good versus evil, right versus wrong. It wasn't about the color. It wasn't about male versus female. As a matter of fact, when I was growing up, I never heard the word racism. We were taught that there were people who are on the side of good and there were those who are on the side of evil. And it was all about that and not about the color. We've been lied to. Black Americans have been lied to. White folks have been lied to. The word racism has been made up in order to divide and conquer. There is no such thing as racism, sexism, homophobism, Islamophobism, Allahu Akbarism, white supremacism, or anti-Semitism is all made up. You're either on the side of good or you serve evil. That's all to it. There's no isms at all. We are a spirit, and our battle is a spiritual battle. It's a warfare between good and evil. So I had an amazing life growing up. I have nothing to complain about.
I really appreciate your outlook of good versus evil to just really simplify the world as it should be.
Yeah.
But have you ever been, say, a victim to this narrative that's taken over? At any point in your life, did you kind of fall into that way of thinking?
I did. When I left Alabama and I moved to California, Los Angeles, at the age of 18, and I was on my own because we were taught that we had to leave home at 18. The boys had to leave home, and that we were trained. We were prepared to work. We were taught how to work, save our money. We were encouraged to get a job, save your money, buy yourself a home, and get married and start a family at 25. So that's the mentality I had. But when I moved to LA, I started listening to the so-called civil rights leaders, people like Jesse Jackson and Louis Farrakhan, the NAACP, a lot of the black preachers and others, and they were saying that white people hated black people because they were black, and that white people were trying to hold black people back. And I believed into that lie because there was no one opposing these people. It seemed as though they were telling the truth. And so I believed the race hustlers that white people were trying to hold me back because of my color. I was a young person at the time, and these people were older than me. And I believed that. And so once I believed into it, I just thought all white people were racist. I thought that they hated black folks and that they were trying to hold black people back because I believed into that lie. And so whenever I dealt with white people, I automatically saw them as my enemies. Even my friends that I had made friends with, if they disagreed with me, I automatically thought it was because of my color. But eventually, long story short, I started to question things. I'm like, if white people are racist, why is it that the black people who are pushing this idea are doing very well in life? They're married, their children are going to the best schools, they have the best jobs, and they were doing well. And that's when I realized that we had been lied to. And so I overcame that by realizing that the blacks were lying to us. They were race hustlers. And so I became a conservative. I left the Democratic Party. I became a Republican conservative. And 32 years have gone by. And I am so far right, I'm about to fall off the cliff.
When you talked about white supremacy, is it a phenomenon in Black America where there is an inferiority complex? And the reason I ask is from an Irish perspective, I would have grown up thinking that British people thought they were superior to Irish people. And I think from an Irish perspective and an African American perspective, we have in some ways a shared history of colonialism. And I would have grown up thinking that every British person thinks they're better than me. And when I had a look at my own thoughts and myself, I realized that actually it was me. I had an inferiority complex. And then once I recognized that, I came to term, well, no British person actually suppressed me or imposed their will on me. Maybe historically, but I've no actual real example of anybody oppressing me. And I found that to be very freeing. And so is that a phenomenon in Black America, an inferiority complex?
100%. Most Black Americans today, not all, but most, believe that white people are superior to them. You hear it all the time when you hear the word white supremacy. They believe that white people are superior to them and that they're inferior. And it's holding them back in life to a point that they're very violent. They have no love. They have no respect for themselves and other people. They're literally out of control. They have no sense of self-containment or self-control because they truly believe that white people are superior. And that's why in the USA, most black people are very destructive. They don't build, they destroy. White people build, black people destroy. And the only purpose on earth for blacks today is for destruction. And everyone who want to destroy, they use the blacks to get them to do that by telling blacks that they are victims, white supremacy is against them, and they can't do it. And this is from the young to a lot of the older ones now. They don't believe they can do it. They fight for reparations. They fight for affirmative action. They fight to get into the white universities and white jobs. They don't build their own jobs. They don't build their own universities. And when white people let them in, instead of making it better, they destroy it. They turn it into a ghetto because most black people are angry. They have no love. They have no character. And they're very violent because they're very insecure. And it's not that white people thinking that about themselves. They don't think that they're superior to the blacks, because if they thought that, they wouldn't be running away from the blacks or afraid to speak up or catering to the blacks. And the more they cater to the blacks, the worse that the blacks get. But it's the mentality of the average black person today, young, middle class, middle age, and some older ones. They truly believe that white people are superior to them. And you can look at their attitudes. You can look at their neighborhoods. They're born out of wedlock. The fathers are nowhere around. Even the black men think that white men are superior to them. It's the darndest thing I've ever seen. And it's because the blacks are angry and they can't see what they're doing. When you have anger, you have hatred, because anger is hatred. And when you're hateful, Satan is your daddy. You're living in darkness and you cannot see what you're doing. And that's the problem with black people today. They cannot see. They're filled with hatred. They have no love.
Okay, and you mentioned this wasn't always the case. So when you grew up, or was it the case? Is this always how black people have taught, or is there a particular time in the recent past where it's changed, something's changed?
Man, it totally wasn't like this when I was growing up. It's amazing that I know it the right way, and now I see what's going on the wrong way, right? When I was growing up, black people got married for the most part. The wives respected the husbands. The husband led the way by being a good example. There was no blaming anyone. I don't ever remember a time growing up on the plantation down in Alabama under the Jim Crow laws when black people saw themselves as victims. I did not grow up with a victim mentality. I was taught by example to deal with things, to overcome all things, and that we can do that as long as we love what's right, love God with all our heart, soul, and might, and our neighbor as ourselves, right? And that you can endure all things. Black people had a sense of class and morality. They dressed well. They had amazing attitude. When I was growing up, they bought land. They built schools. They went off and got educated. Some did. They came back as professionals. And I just never imagined that I would see a day when black people would be so evil and out of control and lack of morality and blaming other people. And the black women are taking over the black men, and the women are becoming so radical. They're worse than the men. And I just never thought that I would live to see a day like this. I never thought, you just don't think that this can happen to a people. I never thought that a radical, a far left, liberal, evil, radical organization like Black Lives Matter, an organization that was founded by a bunch of fat, black, radical lesbians. I never thought that one day black people, men and women, would follow a bunch of fat, black lesbians, communist, socialist lesbians. But the men are following them as though they were doing the right thing. It's the darndest thing I ever seen. And Black Lives Matter is worse than what they can ever imagine the KKK to be. They're worse than the KKK in many ways. And I just never thought that I would see black men and women, white men and women bowing down to a bunch of fat, black, radical lesbians. You know things are bad when you see it happening in that manner.
Yeah, so this mindset, is it peculiar to black people? Because I'm kind of thinking it's more of a cultural thing, and I doubt it's confined to black America. I would imagine there is a fair chunk of white America where that mindset is at work as well. So my question is it a class thing? Is it purely, is it divided along the color of someone's skin, or is it a cultural class issue?
Well, I see it more and more in millennial whites now because they have been brainwashed in the public schools. They have been told that to be white is racist, to be white is evil, and that the poor black people, they can't make it because of slavery, Jim Crow, systemic racism, police brutality. It's all lies, but because the white kids have been brainwashed in the public schools today, a lot of them have believed into that lie. And there's this organization called Antifa. Mm-hmm. And it's a bunch of young white men and women who are wealthy. They come from wealthy backgrounds, but they've been made to feel guilty for being wealthy. And they believe that America is not a good place. So they have joined forces with Black Lives Matter and others in order to destroy America. They don't like capitalism. They prefer socialism. They believe that blacks are victims, when it's just really not true, but they've been brainwashed to believe that. So yeah, they are on that gravy train as well.
Yeah, from an Irish perspective, I would have grown up hating America. Most Irish people will. They will view America as an imperialistic power and despise the kind of capitalist consumer culture. And that's prevalent in Ireland.
That's amazing. America is the greatest country on this side of heaven, even though they're trying to destroy it. And one of the issues that we have in our country now is that white people are afraid, not all, but most, they're afraid to speak up to the blacks, to disagree with them for fear of being called racist.
Yeah.
And I've been saying for 31 years that white people need to speak up, because when you have fear, you bring out the worst in your enemy and they will destroy you. And so they are destroying white people because whites are afraid to speak up. My great concern is that if the whites don't start speaking up, we're going to have South Africa in America, and we're pretty close to that already. And most of you, I don't know how many people are aware, but in South Africa, the blacks have taken over South Africa, and they are destroying the white people. They're robbing and stealing and killing, and they have destroyed the police forces there. And so now the whites are not protected along the roadsides. They are now taking away the white people land without compensation. Well, that is coming to America because they're doing exactly the same thing. They're defunding the police departments around the country. They're letting out the inmates in prison. The blacks are being let out without bail bonds and all that. And the crime is going through the roof in America. It's amazing how bad the crime is right now. And they have these radical black females in government, and they hate white people. They hate men. They hate God. And now they're talking about reparations in America. And as of right now, I don't see anything to stop it. And so because white people are afraid to stand up to blacks, period, and especially black females, they don't want to be called racist and they don't want to be called misogynist. And the blacks know how to use that against them. So unless something happens really soon, we will have reparations in America where they will take the white folks' land without compensation. And we're going to see more bloodshed in America because they're getting rid of the police departments by defunding them. A lot of white guys are afraid to become cops because they don't want their lives and their careers destroyed. And it's happening here like night going north.
Yeah, we have the same phenomenon in Ireland where people are afraid to speak up. In the last maybe 20 years, we have seen approximately 20% of our population are now foreign nationals. So there are a total of 103 different nationalities now in Ireland. We had a Black Lives Matter protest in Ireland, of all places. What that's got to do with the States is beyond me. But what happened was there was a Nigerian guy who went into a grocery store. He held up the grocery store with a knife, left there, went to a post office, threatened some people in the post office with the same knife. The police were called. Police arrived, asked him to drop the knife, followed him home to his house where he still refused to drop the knife. Then they tased him. He refused to drop the knife. He tried to stab one of the police officers in the neck with the knife. And after that, then he was shot 5 times and died.
Amazing.
Our media then presented it as it was some sort of travesty. It was some sort of police brutality. And we had maybe 50 or 60 black guys march through a shopping centre, destroying property, demanding justice. And the guy's name was George, which kind of feeds into the George Floyd phenomenon. But we have in this country is we have a bunch of Nigerian kids who have adopted kind of ghetto gangster rap culture. So we have a bunch of Nigerian kids in Ireland who think they are American gangster rappers. And I think that kind of lets us know how kind of crazy the world has become. So it's not confined to the States. And myself and Howard, as an experiment, we thought it might be useful if people took the power out of being called a racist. So if everybody admitted, okay, you know, I'm a racist, I'm homophobic, I'm misogynistic. Now what you going to do?
There you go.
Well, what you going to do? I didn't think I was white until about 6 months ago. I always considered myself Irish. Whiteness would never come into the equation. But recently, we're being forced to consider ourselves as white. And my concern is, I know one of your mantras is to bring the races together. I don't know if that's possible. I would like to think it's possible. I think people have a lot more in common outside of simply the color of their skin. But it's deeply worrying that we're being set up for this white versus black, and that black seems to be set up in our country, at least, as a victim class. It's going to be a perennial victim class, and that white people feel somehow obliged to give them what they want, or that especially Irish people who have no history of, you know, slavery or anything in Africa, bar sending a couple of Catholic priests over to convert the natives, which you could have a long conversation about. But we have a lot of middle class Irish people feeling guilty that somehow they're responsible for the well-being of these black people. And to me, it kind of infantilizes black people. It's like they think black people are children that need to be looked after and cared for. And to me, that's more racist than anything else.
It is. And the thing about it, the blacks have no shame about themselves. And when they are treated as though they're dummies and unable to take care of themselves, they seem to be okay with it. It's not an embarrassment to them. But I've come to realize that around the world, blacks are cursed. They are cursed, and that's why they're out of control. And it's just so unfortunate. In America, it's not uncommon to see white people getting knocked out. I was driving down the road one day and stopped at a stoplight. Some old white guy walking across the road there from one side to another. And some black guy just came out of nowhere and knocked him out in the middle of the street. Wow. The guy nose bleeding, and I went back to help him. And I'm like, who was that? Did you know that guy? He's like, no, I didn't know him at all. And he knocked him out. I was told of a story today where there was a white guy up in Las Vegas somewhere and out fishing, and some black guy or someone pretended to be drowning or something. And the guy went to help him. And when he went there to help him, the guy shot him. It's like it was a setup. And we now have policemen being set up. I heard of talked about it on my show. There was a guy who gave a call to the police like a home issue was going on. So the cops went there to help the guy. He seemed very friendly, but when the cops attempted to go to the door to help him, the guy shot the cops. So it's like they hate the police. They've been trained to hate the cops. It's like black people, not all, but most have no common sense at all. They are not thinking. they were just totally out of control. And as long as white people are on the run, are afraid to be called racist, it's just going to only get better. It just, I don't see how it's going to turn around unless the white people get over the word racism. I don't care what people call me. I don't care what people think about me. That's on them. I got to live my life. I don't hate anyone, but I do speak up and stand up. I love what's right with all my heart, soul, and might. I love my neighbor as myself. I love my country. And I refuse to give in to the children of the lie and allow them to destroy a country that was given to us by God. And I wish that white people would stand up and do the same thing before it's too late, because there's nowhere else to go. The blacks are out of control around the world. Where will they go? And at some point, they got to stand up before we have a race war. Because if they should have a race war, then the government is going to take over, or a civil war or something like that. The government is going to take over, and they're going to take away all of our rights. Freedom of speech, Second Amendment. We won't have a way to protect ourselves because the government want us at war. They want the blacks and the white fighting in order to gain power and wealth for themselves. And the blacks are so dumb, they don't even realize that.
Jesse,
Yeah.
would you then say that this is a deliberate conspiracy by some kind of power brokers to actually come to that end?
Yes, sir. I remember, for what I can remember, it may have started even before I can remember, but up until the so-called civil rights movement down in Alabama, started by Martin Luther King Jr. and Jesse Jackson and all those people, blacks were doing very well. White people and black people were getting along. And then came the so-called civil rights movement telling the blacks that white people are against you and you can't make it. They hate you. And they took over the hearts and minds of the blacks. They put the fathers out of the homes, and they sold the black people over to the Democratic Party under Lyndon B. Johnson. And the blacks gave up free thinking. They gave up working for themselves. The women started having children out of wedlock. And they started to blame people for their issues. And it's just been downhill ever since. The worst thing that ever happened to black people, one of the worst things, maybe there are other things as well, but one of the worst things that happened to black people was the so-called civil rights movement. No such thing as civil rights anyway, but when they fell for the civil rights movement, it was the worst thing that happened because they have not recovered since then. They now have black leaders, and we never had any black leaders before. Growing up, that was unheard of to have a black leader. The parents were examples for the children, and when you become an adult, God was your leader, not some human being. It's abnormal to have another, especially for men, it's abnormal to have another man over you as your leader. But the blacks are proud to do it. They don't think for themselves now. Whatever their leaders tell them to do, they do it without even thinking about it. And so one of the worst things that has happened to black people was this so-called civil rights movement. It was a big mistake.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
In relation to men and women, and particularly black men and women. So I had a thought, if I was thinking back to slavery, where it's got to be incredibly emasculating to watch your menfolk be treated as slaves. So is there a resentment within black women, a historical resentment because of that?
No, it's all made up. They pretend that it's about slavery. Okay. It's not, because if that was true, I would have seen that in my generation growing up. I would have heard my grandparents talking about it, or their parents. There was no talk about slavery, little or no talk about it. There was little conversation about Jim Crow because the blacks didn't have that kind of mentality. These people lied about slavery. They are lying about Jim Crow, and they're feeding these lies to the young people, and the young people are falling for it. And it's to divide and conquer. It's for personal gain, to gain power, wealth. You have Oprah Winfrey and others. That's all they ever talk about is slavery this and slavery that, Jim Crow laws and But yet they're doing well. They're living house to house. They don't have to live with the inmates that they're letting out of prison. This slavery and Jim Crow has nothing at all to do with the condition of black people. What they've done is turned away from God. They're turned away from the family. Black women, men and women are not getting married. The women are raising the children, and the women are angry. And the reason that they're angry because Satan is their daddy, and the God above is the man God. And so they hate men because they represent the sons of God, and they are turning the children away from the fathers. And it just starts in the home. It's all evil that's coming from the women because the men are too weak to control the women. They have no idea what's going on.
Okay. When I read part of your bio in relation to bond, so it mentions that at the age of 38, you discovered what was holding you back.
Yes.
And that it was essentially around anger. And is that when you set up Bond? Is that where you have the idea, okay, well, something needs to be done? Because I think it's all good for everybody to talk about these issues endlessly. But I think unless something's actually being done about it, well, then it's pretty pointless. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that, or if you can just fill us in a little bit more about what makes you set up Bond and about your experience of that moment you have where it's like, okay, this is what needs to change.
Yeah, when I realized that we had been lied to by the so-called civil rights leader, it wasn't about slavery. It wasn't about Jim Crow. It wasn't about white people. It's about the destruction of the family and being lied and brainwashed by the so-called black leaders and the media and Jesse Jackson and others. I also realized that I had insecurity within myself because what happened was when my mother got pregnant, she was dating my father. She got pregnant, and when she told my father about it, he denied it. And when he denied it, that I was his, my mother became angry and didn't want anything to do with my father. So she got married to my stepfather before I was born so that I would not be born out of wedlock. During those days, it was an embarrassment for black women to get pregnant out of wedlock. So she got married, but she didn't want me to have anything to do with my father because she hated him. So she tried to keep me away from him. I had this yearning for my father. As a kid, I wanted my father, even though my stepfather was a nice guy, he provided, but he wasn't my father. Inside of me, I wanted my real father. And so I became insecure. You know, I couldn't deal with women in the right way. I was a slut maker and all that stuff, but I couldn't deal with women that way. So I asked God to let me in the right way. So I asked God to let me see myself. And he allowed me to see that I resented my mother who tried to turn me away from my father. And so at 38, it was the hardest thing I ever had to do, but I went and forgave her. I said, hey, I've been hating you all my life because you tried to turn me away from my father. And I went and talked to my father, and everything she told me was a lie. It wasn't true. And that's why we shouldn't believe what the mothers have to say about the fathers, because they're not going to tell the truth. Women don't tell the truth. They can't tell the truth because Satan is their daddy, so they hate the man, right? And if you are close to your father, they'll destroy you to try to get back at your father. But when I forgave my mother, apologized for resenting her, God forgave me. And he gave me back my identity, turned me back to my father. And I've been free ever since then. It's been 32 years now. So I started Bond, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny, because I realized it wasn't about color. It wasn't about male or female. It was about good or evil. Women hated men because Satan is the woman's God and the God above is the man God. And that was the battle that was happening. So I started to show men that they need to go and forgive their mothers and grandmothers and for turning them away from their fathers, and forgive their fathers for not being able to protect them from the mother. Because if you have not overcome your mother, you become attracted to what you hate. And every woman you get involved with is your mother. And you don't know how to deal with her. So the men end up becoming the boy, and the wife end up becoming the mother. And it just repeats itself. I've said that any man that has anger, any male that has anger is a female. he has the identity of his mother. He's a woman. And so when he go and apologize for hating his mother, then God will forgive him and take the mother's identity away from him and give him back his identity he had before she traumatized him spiritually. So I started Bond, and 31 years have gone by now, and it's just been amazing. We're dealing with people around the world of all races. I counsel every day with men and women around the world. We have we have an entrepreneur academy where we're teaching the guys how to start businesses. I started a credit union to loan them the money because a lot of the guys, the mother messed up their credit. And we work with all guys and some women too, but mostly guys. And people can check us out by going to rebuildingtheman.com, rebuildingtheman.com, or call 800-411-BOND, 800-411-2663. They can also go to jlptalk.com, jlptalk.com. And what I'm finding is that it's the same issue around the world. It's not about racism or about white people or black people. It's about mothers turning their sons and daughters away from their fathers, and the kids are taking on the identity of the mother, and they become just like her. They become subject to her. It's a spiritual battle between good and evil, right versus wrong. That's why God said we must be born of the Spirit. All who are born through the mother are dying, but those who are born of the Spirit are living. God said there will come a day when I'll return the children to the fathers and the fathers to the children. You're never going to be able to love God until you can love your earthly father, because your earthly father, even if he's weak, he represents God. He's the son of God. And you're not going to know the father unless you love the son. You got to love your earthly father. Otherwise, you're just going to catch hell because you're living in darkness.
Okay. I have a question in relation to men needing to forgive their father. Given from what I read, there's an absence of fathers in the African American community. There's
Yes.
also an absence of fathers in the Irish community as well. Particularly, it's the underclass. It's not peculiar to any one color. In that absence of fathers, and there's no resolution. If you don't know who your father is, you're not going to be able to have that conversation. Is that important for people in your view, or is it more of an internal thing for people to be able to forgive on that level?
Good question, man. Let's say you can't find your father or your father's dead. You need to get to know yourself. And once you know thyself, you will see that of yourself, you can do nothing. You could not help when you were weak. You could not help but be out of control. You could not deal with your woman or your mother. You will understand. By understanding yourself, you will understand your father, and understanding that would cause you to forgive him. But it's best to go to your mother and to your father and forgive them, because when you go to the mother, you go and just say, hey, I'm sorry for hating you, for turning me away from my father, or imposing your will on me, whatever the situation is. God will forgive you. Also, you get your courage back when you face your mother. The hardest thing in the world for the average male or female to do today is to face their mothers. And the reason for that is because they hate the mothers, and whomever you hate control you. And the mothers know how to make the kids feel guilty because she know how to play victim and make them identify with her. Mothers are not victims. They are victimizers, but they make you think that it's the father. Fathers, when they leave home, they don't leave their children, they leave the mothers, because they can't have the mothers. But the mothers make you think that your father left you when they really left her. And so that's why you need to go and face your mother so you can get your courage back. It's best to face them if you can. But if not, if you can't find them, just realize they couldn't help themselves, just as you can't help yourself. And that will cause you to forgive them, and then you'll be free. But it's best to face them. God said that if you have a problem with someone, go and forgive them, and I will forgive you. Don't ask for forgiveness. You forgive them, and God will forgive you, and you'll be free. It'll be amazing. He will give you perfect peace. Your talent will find you. you would just have an amazing life. You would have no fear, no doubt, no worries, no insecurities, no suicidal thoughts, no depression. You wouldn't worry about tomorrow or yesterday. You would just live in the presence of God. And that is amazing.
Yeah, that's interesting. My father left home when I was 5.
Yes.
The following year, he committed suicide. And so from the age of 5 upwards, I had no father in my life. Then when I got to kind of 17 or 18, when I was actually having fully formed thoughts, there was one moment where I was reading letters he sent to family before he died. And at that moment, I forgave him for leaving. I didn't have any idea why he left. All I knew was that he left. And because he did leave, I considered him weak. But I had no comprehension of why he might leave. And then it was maybe 5 or 6 years after that when I had that moment where I realized, hang on a minute, my mother's a bit of a fucking tyrant, forgive my language. And then I could know, okay, well, maybe my father didn't leave because he abandoned the children. Maybe it was an escape from prison.
100%.
And that's when it dawned on me. But yeah, it's interesting that people don't have to face their fathers, which leads me into the next question, which is men's responsibility to their family. Now, this is where we might have a problem, because I'll tell you a little bit about my life. So I had 2 children out of wedlock. So a dire relationship.
Yeah.
I had to go through the court system to get custody of those 2 children. And I am married to a woman who has 1 stepchild, and we have 3 children. So a whole mess of problems. And especially from your point of view, and this is part of being Irish. So Irish people like to take on the kind of spirit of Jesus Christ and suffering in so much as we can take on as much suffering as possible. But I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. It's stressful. It's awful. I wouldn't advise it for other people to do it this way. But I just like to get your thoughts on that. Obviously, we can't go back in time and change what happened in the past. But for young guys coming up, when they get involved with a woman.
First, let me ask, did you forgive your mother for turning you away from your father?
Yes.
You went to her?
I went to her numerous times. I don't think I actually spoke to her in that directive form that said, "Ma'am, I forgive you for that." I don't think so. So
why not?
Maybe thinking of it. I don't think it was consciously in my mind at the time. So,
okay.
Yeah. So my mother, she died of cancer. So she was at home with us for maybe 3 months for palliative care. So the kind of year prior to that, we got a chance to get really close and honest, which was awful at times, because when I told her how I actually felt about her and felt about certain things that she'd done, she screamed and hollered and wailed and she beat her chest. But again, it was a way to try and get me to shut up. But at that stage, like, it was a moot point. It couldn't be done. Like, I wasn't afraid of her or being basically kowtowed to be quiet because of that emotional reaction.
Yeah, the hardest thing in the world for a woman to do is to admit that she's wrong. Her ego is so out of control that she would kill you before she admits she's wrong. And that's because Satan is her daddy. And Satan is all ego, so she has the nature of Satan. And that's why you see all the hell coming through them. But as for my advice to men, when you do date, do not have sex out of wedlock, because women are sex dealers and men are sex addicts. And when you resent your mother, it awakens that sexual nature inside of you, because when you resent your mother, the woman become your God, and now you're subject to her. But when you forgive your mother, then God would change that order and give you back the natural order of God and Christ, Christ and man, man over woman and woman over children. And the woman would no longer be your God. And that way she would have to follow you instead of you following her. But so I tell the guys, do not have sex out of wedlock. Do not do it. do not marry a woman who already has kids, because that woman is already angry at the weak man that she was with. He couldn't handle her. And so it's like buying a used car. All you're going to have is problems.
I suppose it depends on the used car you purchase. If you purchase an expensive one or a decent one
with
to
low
begin with,
miles,
you might have less problems. But
Yeah.
you're right. I've had problems with dealing with her ex-husband and the stepchild. I'm not his father. I can never be his father.
Yeah.
I don't know where to draw the line, where I step in, where I step back. But he's not my natural child, so I can never have that relationship with him.
And the kids, it's hard enough when they lose their fathers and their mothers. They want, their nature want their fathers and mothers together. And if they're not together and some other guy come between them and their mother, or some other woman between the father and the mother, it brings on resentment to the children, because they don't want a step parent, whether it's a stepfather or a stepmother. They're so yearn for their natural parents. And when these parents get together, it's about themselves. It's not about the kids. So the kids are not getting any love either way, so they resent you for it. And mothers and fathers who get married or get involved with another man while having little children are selfish people. They are not thinking about the children. They're thinking about their own ego needs, and the kids end up suffering for it. I would never, ever recommend that a man marry a woman who already has children, or a woman marry a man who has children. That parent should dedicate their life to their kids. And maybe once the kids are adults and gone their way, if they want to remarry or get involved, that may be a different story. But the worst thing you could do to children is to get involved with a woman, or a woman get involved with a man while they're little. And also, I am telling men now, never, ever, never, 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 but never, ever, ever marry a woman who is educated. Because a woman who is educated is a bitch on wheels.
Okay, let me ask you this if I can. So
Yeah.
If that's the workout, like, is that something that you see there's a natural outgrowth of a particular type of lifestyle, if it's a Christian lifestyle, or is that a conversation men need to have with women at the very start, where it's okay,
Yes.
listen, this is what I need, this is what I expect, and this is what I honestly need, and this is what I honestly expect from a woman. So there's no mystery about it.
That's right. That's the whole point of dating. So you could be yourself and honest with her, and you'll see what type of woman you're getting. And she should be honest with the man, so she can see the type of man she's getting. But because of the ego and the sex thing in the way, they don't be honest with the woman. And the woman is not honest with the man. And when you marry her the morning after the night of, you wonder, what the world have I done here? It's not the same woman you dated for 30 years. Because she hid who she really is. And women who are educated, they think that they're a man. They think they're male. They think they're equal to men. And they would never make for a good wife and a mother to your children. And so dating without the sex allows you to see who you're getting involved with, who you're about to marry, if you end up marrying that person. But once you have that sex, you lose sight of the reality of the type of woman you're dating, because women are very cunning. They'll be whatever you need them to be until they get you, and that's when all the hell come out. And they know that you're weak to sex, so they're like a sex dealer. They'll serve you the sex just to keep you high in order to get you so that they can control you. And when they get control over you, they hate the fact that they have control over you. But they don't want to, they want you to be strong, but their ego want to control you. So they have a love-hate relationship. And if you have not overcome your mother, you're married to your mother, you don't know how to deal with it. You end up just like your father.
Yeah, I find it very strange when I see feminists align themselves with Islam.
Yeah.
So it's so bizarre. So I think there's a want in women to be controlled, that they want strong men. And
they can't help it. They're looking for a man who loved God with all his heart, soul, and might, even before he loved her. She's looking for a man that will lead her. Women need men the way men need God. Women need men to lead them, The man came from God and the woman came from the man. So she needs that identity to guide her. When men are weak, women are living in darkness and they can't see their way clear. So they're looking for a man that seems to be strong, and they think that Allah Akbar is strong, but he's not. He's weak as well, but they're looking for the strength of a man to help her overcome the hell that they're in.
Okay, that's really interesting. One of the other things I wanted to talk to you about was immigration.
Yes.
So, watching the news cycle in the States, where we had the kind of 4 years of President Trump, it seemed to be
the
a
great
case.
white hope. The great white hope.
Maybe the last white hope. I don't know. I've mixed views on Donald. In any event, it seemed to be there was some level of sanity around an immigration policy. We suffer the same thing here. To question an immigration policy is to be classified as racist. It's absolute insanity. How people can't see that it's a bad idea to have open borders where there's no limits on immigration other than to have the destruction of a country.
Yep.
Is incredible. And I would have thought for the black community as well, and especially for working class communities, that it's a direct threat to their livelihoods if you have hundreds upon thousands of South Americans pouring into the country every year. And it seems with the Democrats and Joe Biden that's going to be the case now, where it's a case of open borders and it's a free for all. Am I right in thinking that?
100%, man. It's a mess. Everything that the Great White Hope did, Donald Trump, to make us better, they are tearing it down overnight. They're destroying it. And there were a few illegal aliens coming in under Donald Trump, but nothing like it is today. The wall was going up in spite of what he had to deal with, Donald Trump. Donald Trump is hated by the children of the lie, the liberal media, the black race hustlers, the Democratic Party, the Rhino Republicans, the Never Trumpers, because they want control of the people. They want cheap labor. They don't care about the American people at all. And so the president would bring it all that together. We had jobs coming back. The wall was going up. Mexico and the United States had a deal where these people who were so-called seeking asylum would have to stay in Mexico until they were checked out before they would let them come here. No amnesty. It was amazing. And as soon as they stole that election and Joe Biden took over, and that wicked, evil, empty woman, Kamala Harris, which is Satan in bloomers, they stopped the building of the wall. They're letting these people come in. They are coming in by the drove. They're waiting at the borders to cross over. Some are just coming in anyway. They don't care about the Chinese virus or anything. They're letting these people in, and these people are devastating the communities, especially black communities. And it's crazy. Blacks are so angry, they can't see what's happening to them, because prior to Donald Trump, they were letting the illegals come in, and they were overwhelming the black community, running them out of their own communities. They were moving back to the South, the blacks were, and they were bringing in Mexican gang members and the Crips and the Bloods and the Mexican gangs fighting one another, crime out of control, taking the job, public schools overcrowded. And the blacks won't do anything about it because their leadership won't say anything about it. They're going along with it. They think that if white people say something, they are racist, even though the blacks are suffering the most from it. The whole country is suffering, but blacks are overwhelmed. And now we're starting to go through that again under this administration. And I have to tell you, even under Barack Obama, the fallen messiah, and Big Mama Michelle, things really got bad then, and they have not returned. Donald Trump made it better somewhat, but he had a lot to go up against because the Rhino Republicans didn't really work with him. In spite of that, things was improving in this country in a major way. But now overnight, by the way of executive order, Joe Biden has changed all that. It's amazing. It's like a nightmare is happening to America right now.
Can you explain to our Irish viewers what a Rhino Republican is? I don't think they'd be aware of that.
A Rhino Republican is a person that's are Republican in name only. And you're supposed to be like a representative, whether a congressman or a senator or a governor or mayor. They don't stand for anything. They have the same mindset that the Democrats have. They're afraid of being called racist. They won't fight against the Democrats because they're in there now for money and power too. In all honesty, the Republican Party today is no different than the Democratic Party. I have no trust in them unless Donald Trump come back or someone rise up who is as tough as Donald Trump is. I would never vote for another Republican because they are Republicans in namesake only, and they are doing nothing to stop this crap from happening in the country. They refuse to work with Donald Trump, and so we don't have anyone representing us in the Republican Party at this point.
How long do you see Biden lasting? And from what I see, he looks like a reanimated corpse. He's probably senile, and it just looks like he's got 6 months in him, and then it's Kamala Harris.
Yeah. Joe Biden doesn't look like he even knows that he's the president. It looks like you have to remind him every morning, you're the president. I need you to read this information. He's in a coma. My father died. He developed Alzheimer's. And I remember when he first started becoming that way, he was like Joe Biden is today, and then eventually my father forgot where he lived. He forgot us, who we were, and Joe Biden is going down that same road. I don't know if he has Alzheimer's. They haven't said it, but the symptoms are the same. Kamala Harris is already running it. Kamala and the evil women of the Democratic Party and the the evil weak men of the Democratic Party. I don't think Joe Biden even realized he's the president. He's just doing what they tell him to do.
Jeez. I would consider that the primaries and your recent election is basically mass elder abuse. Like, there's very few guilty Americans when it comes to this charge, I believe, because you can't do that to a person at the end of their lives, no matter what they did in the past.
Right.
It's tragic.
Yeah, it's awful. But I wonder why. But I understand the nature of women now. But it's amazing that Joe Biden's wife, his sons, his family member would allow them to use him in this way. But when you have a far sense of power and money, you don't really care about your fellow man at all. So they're using Joe Biden for the money and the power. They can care less about Joe Biden. They don't care about each other. They'll turn on each other if you disagree with them. If one should disagree with the other, they have no love. Satan is their daddy. And so they have no love for the elderly or anyone. They have none. They're all evil, no love.
Okay. Can I ask you a little bit about your personal life, going back to children and women? Are you married? Do you have children?
I'm not married. I had a child, unfortunately, out of wedlock, a son. Real men make boys first. So I had a son. And he is now married and doing well. He has a daughter and a son, and his daughter got married, and she has a little boy. So I'm a grandfather and a great grandfather.
Wow.
But I had thought I was going to get married. I grew up wanting to get married. I thought I would have 10 children after I bought my home and everything. But God had a different plan for me, and it just didn't go that way. But when I made him out of wedlock and I saw what happened to him, I decided I would never make another child out of wedlock. And that's why I never did it again. But I do have a son and a granddaughter and a grandson and a great-grandson.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the redefinition of family? So in Ireland now, I'm amazed. In Ireland, in the last 20 years, we have gone from a strict Catholic country into probably the most liberal country on the planet. So we've legalized abortion, we've legalized gay marriage, and I find it shocking that people can be changed in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
Essentially through a media propaganda campaign. So now we have Gay couples can adopt children. Children are being taken away from poor single mothers and poor communities and being handed over to different sectors of society for adoption and fostering. So it's a particularly controversial topic over here. You can't talk about it. It's essentially forbidden. And I think the reason why is there's a fear that if we have these conversations that we're going to turn around and go, okay, well, let's round up all the homosexuals and let's basically stick them into some sort of camp. Or in our country, what we used to do to treat homosexuality, we used to give people electroshock therapy to try and cure them of homosexuality. So do you think homosexuality, is it a genetic thing? Is it a cause of trauma? Howard would have some good thoughts on this as well. Or are you of the mind that it falls back into that dichotomy of good versus evil?
100%. Number one, I want to tell you that those same things are happening here, and we are a Judeo-Christian nation. And when I was growing up, these people would never have been able to take over the country in the way that they have done and are doing, especially being a Judeo-Christian nation. And wrong is right and right is wrong now in our country. We got to turn that around. You can overcome anything in life. And the reason that we have homosexuals and lesbians is because they resent their mothers. They have her identity or grandmother, whatever woman was in charge of their lives. They have her spirit. And some of them have really mean mothers, aggressive mothers. And so that's why you see some in worse condition than others. There are homosexuals and lesbians who realize that something's wrong with that lifestyle. They just don't know how to overcome it. There are those who have embraced it as though it's normal, the radical ones. But it's the spirit of their mothers that's made a home in them. They can overcome it. It's not from God. When they say they feel like a woman, they really do, because they have their mother's spirit. So they do feel like a female, but it's the spirit that made a home in them, and they can overcome that. We have made a mistake, what this country has, by accepting a wrong as a right. And we have made a mistake by allowing them to come out of the closet and accept it. We should have never allowed that to happen, but showed them how to overcome it. And they should not be adopting children. They should not be treated as though it's normal. We shouldn't hate them, of course, but we shouldn't accept it as a norm. We should show them how to overcome it. If they went and forgave their mothers, they can overcome her identity without a doubt. But when they accept it as a right, it becomes very destructive. And that's what you see happening across the country.
Yeah, from my experience with a couple of lesbians, I know the majority of them, it's a kind of rejection of men. They've had physically abusive relationships with men, and they no longer wanted any further contact with men, but they still had a requirement for some sort of loving relationship and somebody to share their life with. So that's where I noticed the kind of the trauma that comes into it, and it's a rejection of men who are particularly tyrannical towards them in their previous relationships.
I bet if you look closely, though, they had a bad relationship with their mothers growing up. They hate their mothers and grandmothers, but they've been told that it's the father. So when they do get involved with men, they treat the men in the same way their mothers treat men. And men, if they're not overcome their mothers, they don't know how to handle that, because they're subject to the spirit of the mother. And that spirit is in other women as well, the same spirit. That's why the men got to overcome their mothers by forgiving them for what they've done, so that when they do run into the same spirit as in other women, they can deal with it in the right way rather than giving into it.
Okay. One other thing I want to pick up on, you said how they've been able to take over, or they've such a prominent position in society today.
Yeah.
And given that the States is a Judeo-Christian nation, much like Ireland. So my question would be, is there an inherent weakness within Christianity of forgiveness and turning the other cheek that allows that spirit, let's say, to be taken advantage of?
100%. The attack is upon the man, the male, and they know that if they can destroy the male, they are destroying the image of God, and that the men are not going to be able to stand up to them and deal with it. I can't guarantee because I'm not God, but I can tell you, if men were to be born of the Spirit of the Father, this situation would change overnight because it's all spiritual. But if they don't overcome the mother, they won't be able to deal with that spirit and other women. The only reason that is out of control is because it's in the man to control it, not the woman. Women don't have power at all. The men have the power. Women don't, no such thing as a strong woman. It's just they're weak men, and it makes it look like they're strong women, but men are weak. If men were to return to the Father, all this crap will end overnight because greater is he that's in the man than he that's in the woman. God is the God of the man, and Satan is the God of the woman. And women need men to bring them out of that hell that they're in. And that's what's the problem. That's why they constantly attack men. They are now having men believe that, as little boys believe that they're women. They're cutting off their body parts. They're doing everything they can to destroy the image of God. And they may not realize what they're doing, but that's what's happening. When you destroy the man, you destroy the image of God. You take the man out of the home, the women and children are subject to evil. You take them out of the schools, the women and children are subject to evil, out of the workplace or out of the government. Wherever women take over, that's where hell come alive. The gates of hell will prevail.
Okay. Howard, do you have any questions?
Yeah, you mentioned that you'll never vote for a Republican ever again, and how the Republican Party is just like the Democrat Party. We have a similar situation in our parliamentary parties where it's basically they're all the same. They're going in the same direction. One will be a little more radical than the other. The one is more business orientated. One is more Green New Deal orientated. But basically voting, there's no opposition to any of the evil that plagues our country. So I wouldn't vote for anyone because it will take too long to go through that parliamentary process. So I'm gathering from you that politics isn't going to be the solve-all, the route to cleaning this up. What would you say that the solution is?
That men return to God, return to the Father, love their earthly father. So through him, they can love God, because if you don't love your earthly father, you can never love God. When men wake up, man, this stuff will end. And then we can take back our government, because our government used to be controlled by Christians. And as a result, we had an amazing government. We had an amazing country. So men got to return to the Father so that they can overcome fear. They can come out of the darkness into the light, and they can see how to deal with this. That's why we've been 31 years rebuilding the family by rebuilding the man. And there are men that are starting to wake up around the world, and especially here in America. I'm seeing it every day. They're hearing the truth. They're going and forgiving their mothers and returning to their fathers. And that gives me hope, because it doesn't take a bunch of men to change the thing. It just takes one person. Two is even amazing. And so these guys are waking up, and a change is coming. But we got to return the men back to the fathers, the men and women, but especially the men.
Are we winning that war?
It looked like we're not, but we are. I have faith. We'll take America back. America will be led by children of God. We will get back to it. I have hope. I'm not giving up. And when I see these guys wake up, it just gives me even more hope, because greater is he that's in us than he that's in the world.
My skin is tingling just hearing that.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. I'm excited about it. I have strong hope, because at one time I didn't know what was going to happen. But over the last however many years, it's just been amazing. The number of men of all races, too, not just whites. Blacks are waking up, some black men around the world. I get calls from Africa, from your country, from down under, from South Korea. Men are waking up around the world. So it's going to be fine. if you have anger, it would seem hopeless. But once you overcome that anger, you walk by the light of God, and in Him there's nothing but faith and life and no fear, no doubt.
Okay, it's good to hear your optimism. When we have conversations, it can get very dark very quickly.
Yeah.
Look around
But
the world today.
don't worry, God is with us, and we'll be fine.
Okay,
simple as that.
Yeah.
Don't give up.
Okay. I want to thank you for your time. So I think we will wrap it up there. Unless you've got anything else you'd like to ask, Howard, or add.
I would like to ask. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead, Howard. Then
Okay.
I have a question for Howard.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Maybe we didn't run this through with your people beforehand, so feel free to say no. But would you give us a show ID? You know, I'm Jesse Lee Peterson. You're listening to the Anti-Broadcast. I like the way you say amazing. Maybe if you can work that in, that would be cool.
What's the name of the broadcast again?
The Anti-Broadcast.
Anti-Broadcast.
Yep.
Okay. Let me ask you this first.
Mm-hmm.
Howard, have you gone and forgiven your mother?
Yes, I have actually. But
how
maybe
did
not
it go?
for the. I don't think that she has been ready to fully embrace that for herself. But you know, that's not my business, and
That's
I trust that she will, you know, come to peace in her own way, as I will one day, I think.
Good, man. Yeah, it's not up to her. God said for us to forgive them, and He will forgive us. Never ask a person for forgiveness. You forgive them, and God will forgive you. And if they say, "Oh, I was wrong," that's fine. If not, let them suffer and die. That's on them.
It's backwards from what we're taught.
Yeah, there's nowhere in the scriptures where it says go and ask for forgiveness. But it does say, before you enter into the kingdom of heaven, go and forgive, and I will forgive you, because human beings don't forgive. And what you're apologizing for is hating, because anyone that hates, that has anger is really hatred. It just gave it a new name. But anyone who has anger has hatred in their heart. They're playing God. And as long as you play God, you won't know God. But when you apologize for hating them, realizing they couldn't help themselves, then God will forgive you and set you free. Whether they admit it or not is up to them. They don't have to apologize, because women are going to, even mamas and grandmamas, but women are going to pretend like, oh, I don't understand what you're saying. What did I do? It was your father. They never admit that they're wrong. But you forgive them. Sorry for hating you. Then God will forgive you. Never ask for forgiveness. They will not forgive you. God will forgive you, not human beings. So, hi, I'm Jesse Lee Peterson. This is Anti-Broadcast. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep.
The anti-broadcast.
The Anti-Broadcast. Okay. So what do you want me to say?
I don't know. I'm Jesse Lee Peterson, and this is the Anti-Broadcast. It's amazing.
Oh, okay. I am Jesse Lee Peterson, and this is the Anti-Broadcast. It is amazing. Everybody and their mama should listen. Go and tell somebody. It is amazing. Thank you, guys.
Fantastic. That's amazing. That's truly amazing. Thank you very much. There is a light that shines from you. It's very obvious. And thanks for talking to us. Thanks for picking up our spirits. And God bless you, man.
And God bless you guys.
Bless.
Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome. Thank you very much. Thank Aramis for me as well. He was very patient in all my emails annoying him trying to get you to do this. So I'll thank him myself in an email, but if you see him, pass on
I
my
will.
thanks.
Yeah, Hermes is amazing.
Yeah.
See black.
He's a good guy. All right. Good stuff. All right. Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks, guys.
Take it easy.
You're listening to the Anti-Broadcast on Eclectic Vibrations Radio. Check the description for links to full shows, our social media links, as well as links to your favorite podcatchers so that you can keep up to date.